Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. We have a few members who are still in the hall. We got a few folks who are just out in the conference room, but they're coming in just a moment. But I'm going to go get started because I want to be respectful of your time. As you may have heard me say to Delegate Meyer as we were walking in the door, he says, this is even bigger than last year. And it was exciting because when you host an event like this, a community event like this, there's two worries you have. You worry, what if no one shows up? And then the other worry is, but wait a minute, what if everyone shows up? And we're somewhere in the middle tonight, so that's good. For those of you I haven't met before, and that's a lot of people, which pleases me, I'm Marty Noe. I'm a member of the Prince William Board of County Supervisors, but specifically tonight, I'm the chairman of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, which is largely the folks that are sitting here behind me tonight. And if you're not familiar with the authority, I'll just give you a little quick rundown on who we are. The NVTA is an organization that's been in existence for a number of years, but has really become much more high profile in the last 4 years or so. We were created back in 2002 to be the agency that would oversee and allocate funds for transportation, which are specifically dedicated to Northern Virginia. But for a very long time, there were no transportation funds dedicated exclusively to Northern Virginia. So our job was pretty low profile. We were largely a planning organization. And the main thing that we did at that time was plan for regional transportation projects through the TransAction program, TransAction plan, which we're talking about tonight. What we're going to be discussing this evening is the fourth iteration of TransAction. There was TransAction 2020, which is a document that looked forward to the year 2020, which now suddenly doesn't seem that far in the future. That document was about this thick. We then updated it a few years later for TransAction 2030. It's about that thick. TransAction 2040 is about that thick. And then we've stopped adding years to the end of the name, and now we just call it TransAction. And we don't know how thick it's going to be yet because it hasn't gotten back from the printers yet. But that was our main function, was coming up with evaluations for projects in transportation that might get built if we ever had money. Well, 4 years ago, you may recall, the General Assembly passed and Governor McDonnell signed legislation that for the first time provided dedicated transportation funding for Northern Virginia. And now suddenly our role has become much more important, because we do control about $300 million worth a year in transportation funds through what we call HB 2313, as well as a number of other sources of revenue that come generally in smaller packages, but sometimes in bigger amounts, that we also oversee as well. Again, pretty much any time the money is specifically for Northern Virginia. I mentioned the three previous versions of the TransAction plan, and I talked about the thicknesses of the document, but there's another really important thing that has gotten bigger as the project has gotten older. The very first version of TransAction said that we needed to make important, regionally significant transportation investments in Northern Virginia. We would need $9.7 billion over the course of about 20 years. Money never materialized, but we knew that we needed $9.7 billion. By the time we adopted TransAction 2030 in 2007, the cost of the projects had grown, the number of projects we needed had grown, the magnitude of our congestion had gotten worse, our population had grown dramatically. And we estimated that in order to address our transportation needs over a period of time, over the following 23 years, we would need $15.4 billion. In November 2012, we adopted TransAction 2040, which is the document that we're updating this year. And at that point, again, population had grown, traffic problems had grown, and our needs had grown to $23.2 billion. Now, I don't know about you, but I have no idea how much money $23.2 billion is. It is a number that is so large that it is, frankly, pretty unfathomable to me. But, frankly, our congestion problems in this region are also pretty unfathomable. If you travel to other parts of Virginia or other parts of the East Coast, and you talk about transportation with people, they really don't understand how bad our traffic is here. And it's taken us a long time to get that message across to folks in other parts of the state to get support for the funding. The document we're talking about tonight, and the number interestingly doesn't show up on this slide, but the update we're working on right now includes over 350 different projects that could potentially be built over the next 25 years or so, at a grand total of 43. Okay, thank God for Monica. $44.1 billion. Now, to be very clear, I don't have $44.1 billion. And we're going to talk a little later about why the fact that I don't have $44.1 billion is important. But I first want to talk a little bit about what we're doing with the money we do have. most of the money that the NVTA controls comes to us again through HB 2313, which is a statewide, or excuse me, is a regional revenue source that's divided into two pots. 70% of the money that we receive, and it's on the order of about a little over $300 million a year flows to the authority. 70% of that is reserved by this authority as regional revenue funds. These are projects that we use to fund regionally significant congestion relieving projects throughout Northern Virginia. And while I don't want to say that they are chosen with no regard whatsoever for jurisdiction or for transit versus highway or for inside the Beltway or outside the Beltway, what I will say is that those aren't the primary driving factors. Our biggest driving factors choose those projects which relieve the most congestion in the most cost-effective manner. And so there's two pieces. The benefit and the cost are both really important here. The remaining 30% of the money is distributed back to the localities in which it's generated. So if Fairfax County generates a certain amount of money, 70% of Fairfax money stays with Prince William. Stays with Prince William. That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. We can work that out. That'd be great. 30%. I'm working on it, folks. Come on. 30%. They get 30% of all the regional taxes that are generated for their jurisdiction, and the money that flows back to those localities can be used by the local city councils, boards of supervisors, town councils to fund transportation projects of just about any type. How the money is used at the local level is a lot more flexible than it is here at the local level, or the regional level, but at the same time, there's less of it. So those localities have to be maybe every bit as selective in how they make investments as we do here at the regional level. That $300 million a year grows pretty fast. So far, we've through last week, June 30th, that's exactly 4 years. June 30th is the end of a 4-year window of collecting these revenues. We've collected a little over $1.2 billion. Again, that number with a B, I don't know how big $1 billion is, but we've collected that much. 946 million of that has come from the regional sales tax. Every time you go to Target, every time you go to Walmart, every time you go buy a new piece of furniture, you pay 7/10 of a cent in sales tax that is not paid in other parts of the state, but that 7/10 of a cent flows to this organization to make investments to make your commute better. And with that, $864 million has been retained by this authority, and $370 million has been sent back to the localities. And let me assure you, within 24 hours of us getting those localities' monies, those local finance directors are on the phone asking for that check to be sent over to them. What have we done with the money? And I won't get into every project, we'll talk about a few of them. In July 2013, we adopted our first funding program. It was $187 million worth of projects. Now, it's a lot. That's a big number. It includes a bond issuance. We issued bonds in order to be able to fund some mega projects we couldn't have afforded otherwise. And we're very proud to say that the bond rating agencies in New York came back and gave us a AA+ bond rating from all three agencies. We are told that that is the first time in the history of bond rating that a jurisdiction or an organization of our type got that high a bond rating, our very first time in the market. And we acknowledge that's not because we necessarily do such a great job, but rather it really talks about the financial robustness of this region. The bond rating agencies understand that these are revenues being paid by Northern Virginians for Northern Virginians. This money doesn't go to Richmond, doesn't go to the federal government, and they know that Northern Virginians are going to invest well when we're doing it for ourselves with our own money. In 2015, we adopted our FY 15 and 16 program for $336 million. And in FY 17, we approved $466 additional million in funds. Although I'll acknowledge that that includes $300 million for the I-66 Route 28 interchange improvements, which after we approved it, we were told is going to be funded as part of the I-66 outside the Beltway Express Lanes project. So future toll payers are going to pay for that interchange, and that's revenue that will flow back to the authority for us to use in future years for additional projects. In total, we've approved 79 projects throughout the region in every jurisdiction, totaling $990 million. And up until a few months ago, when the Commonwealth Transportation Board adopted their most recent 6-year plan, for about 3 years, I got to tell people that we have invested more money into Northern Virginia transportation than the Commonwealth Transportation Board has invested in the entire state including Northern Virginia. And then they adopted a really big 6-year plan and they beat us, and we're never going to catch up again. But, well, we might, but not this year. But again, and you can't really see this map very well, but there's little dots and stars on the map that just show where all of these projects are. And you can see we're making pretty significant investments both in highway, transit, and multimodal transportation throughout Northern Virginia, and trying to focus again on those places where we can have the biggest impact for the smallest amount of money. This is a list of projects. I'm not going to bother reading it to you. If there's a project on here that's important to you or that's near your house or that you drive on your way to work or way home at the end of the day, it's probably already jumped off the page at you. And I know that because every time I see Route 28 on there, I know that my constituents drive on Route 28 every single day. They get a lot of complaints about it, and I get to now tell them after a generation of neglect, we're finally making investments in it. But the reality is every project on this list, Route 7, Route 1, Loudoun County Parkway, Fairfax County Parkway, all of these are facilities that have needed major investments for a very long time, but haven't been able to get them because of the lack of regional revenues. And now we have those monies. And again, we're making those investments in the places where they make the most difference. We've also made huge investments in transit capital. We invest in transit. We don't pay for transit maintenance. We don't pay for transit operating, but we do buy equipment and facilities. We've invested $170 million into Metro over the last 4 years, including money for the construction of 2 new Metro stations, traction power upgrades on the orange and blue lines. I was on the Kojo Nnamdi show not long ago, and I mentioned the traction power upgrades, and I was told, never in the history of NPR has everyone ever used the phrase traction power upgrades. And I said, electricity makes the trains go. If you want to make bigger trains go, you need more electricity. Pretty good explanation, I think. We've done studies on Route 7, how to expand transit there. Expansion efforts for Virginia Railway Express. Purchased 34 new buses to get more people out of their cars and onto local and regional bus service. And we did a really cool thing. If you look carefully, you can sort of see behind there, there's a picture of us cutting a ribbon. We did something that's never happened before. We cut the ribbon on a set of buses, and we had 4 different jurisdictions and transit agencies celebrating the purchase of new buses at the same time in the same place. We don't believe that's ever been done any place before. We're building new bus garages to be able to expand in the future, new park and ride facilities. I got to cut the ribbon the other day on the new Crystal City Multimodal Center. It's an area around a Metro station. There was a Metro station there. The only thing you could do was get on and off the Metro. It was difficult even to walk up to the Metro. Now we've made investments that allow people to use bicycles, bicycles, walking, buses, other kinds of transit facilities, and even driving cars to get to Crystal City, and then from there go any place that Metro can take them. So that's what we've been doing up until a few months ago. And then for the last year or so, we put really a lot of our energy into updating this transaction plan. TransAction is the document that provides the largest amount of data, not all the data, but the largest amount of data to us in making decisions about which projects should get funding. And this is a particularly important update. Like I said, it's our 4th iteration. But it's really important because this is the first update that we've done since the passage of the Transportation Funding Bill. And the reason it's such a big change for us is, and I'll admit this happened. I'll say it didn't happen in my jurisdiction, but I'll explain why in a minute. When we last did this update 5-6 years ago, there was no money. Not only was there not money to build things, there wasn't even really any money to hire the consultants we needed to do the update. And there were a lot of projects that we simply didn't have the resources to evaluate to put in the plan. So there's a really large number of projects that haven't been in this regional transaction plan in the past, but are being added in this year because now that there's money, there's more projects that are seeking opportunities to take advantage of that funding. And frankly, traffic's gotten worse during that period of time. We have those 358 projects that we're studying are divided across 11 regional corridors. We divide the region up into 11 main corridors. Those 11 corridors are broken up into 28 sub-corridors. And then we don't evaluate all 358 projects. It would take too long, it would be too expensive, and the data might not actually be that meaningful because there'd be so much of it. So what we do is we bundle those projects together. We'll take a handful of projects that are all in that same, one of those 28 sub-corridors, and say, which sub-corridors are in the most need of improvement? Where can we have the biggest impact? And then at some future point in time, we can go back in and say, which of the projects in that sub-corridors are the most urgent for us to fund? We've been engaged with the public on this for months. We've been out in your communities. Not everyone's gotten a chance to talk to us, but we're doing the best we can on this. And we're going to continue that up until the 23rd of this month before we then go into the next round of analysis and take a final vote. And this is a really important point. Everything in this plan is based on a certain set of assumptions. You may be familiar with the Council of Governments, who periodically issues a set of population and employment estimates. They tell us how many more people are coming to our region, where they're likely to live, how many more jobs are coming to our region, where they're more likely to be located. And that information, those projections become our baseline data for evaluating where more transportation investments will be needed in the future. And this is the part that makes this plan very different than any other and can make it a little frustrating. As I mentioned before, $44 billion is a tremendous amount of money. And we get asked, well, why do you plan for $44 billion of investments when you're not going to have the money? And this is by design an unconstrained plan. The goal is not to say, this is what we're going to build. We have lots of other processes and even other organizations that are asking the question of what is going to be accomplished by what we plan to build at this time. The purpose of this study is to say, there are a lot of things we could build. It is impossible to choose the best ones based on our own best judgment. If you ask most of us are here are elected officials or former elected officials, and every single one of us can tell you what the single most important project in the entire region is, and you know which one it is? It's the one that their constituents complain about the most. We've gone beyond that. What we've said is we're going to take all the projects, every project that is of any regional significance, and we're going to evaluate them all, assign scores to them, again, based on these bundles. We're going to assign scores to them, and that empirical data then becomes the baseline data we use to make funding decisions, and that process begins later this year for the next round. Again, the key, I've got a lot of slides here. The key point I want to point out at this slide is there is no singular focus on any one project or any mode. The point of that, said in simpler terms, and I'll describe a scenario that Monica and I have talked about a lot in the last few months. One thing that we talk about a lot is we cannot fund any project which is not in this plan. If it's not in this plan, this authority cannot put money toward it. But we have two problems we bump into when we tell people that. The first one is everybody in this room has some highway or transit or pedestrian project they'd like us to invest in. And what happens is people open up this document, they visit our website, and they see, oh, the project I like is in the plan. Great, it's going to get built. Not so fast. Because there are 350 projects and not enough money. We expect about $6 billion over the next 30 years. In terms of the number of projects, there's 350 projects. If you're just measuring by the projects, it's likely that over the next 30 years, only about 25% of those projects will get funded. And if you measure it in terms of dollars, only about 12% of those projects will get funded. Unless new money comes along or something changes that causes us to have to change the plan. So the fact that something's in the plan doesn't mean it gets funded. Now let me tell you the other phenomenon we run into. People will say to us, wait a minute, I don't want that facility to be built. Oh no, it's in the plan. Don't fret, because just like the person who wants something to be built and sees the plan and thinks it will be built, just because something is in the plan doesn't mean that it will be built. The majority of these projects will not be able to see funding unless we get a lot more money into this region or unless the cost of construction goes down dramatically. And I know we've got some highway construction folks in the room, and I don't think any of them are raising their hand to lower their prices tonight. This is my very favorite slide just because this chart is so cool. This is a graphic, our staff put this together, and I've never seen anything like this. Each of the colors you see around the outside of this circle represent a different jurisdiction. Now, these are groups of jurisdictions. Manassas and Manassas Park are included in Prince William. Fairfax City and Falls Church are included in the Fairfax numbers. But we identify Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, Arlington, Alexandria, Prince George's, Montgomery counties, the District of Columbia, of course. Other Virginia, that's Culpeper, that's Stafford, that's Spotsylvania. Other Maryland, that's Frederick, that's Harford County, that's Howard County. And the thickness of each line, each of those lines goes between one spot and another. The thickness of each line indicates the number of trips that are made between jurisdictions or within a jurisdiction every single day in this region. Actually, I'm sorry, that's not true. It doesn't say what's happening today. It says what we believe will be true in 2040. In 2040, these will be the trips. And this is interesting. When we talk about Northern Virginia traffic, this is the main part of this. When we talk about Northern Virginia traffic, it's really tempting to focus on those really long distance commuters. And I got family members who are among them. People who drive from Dumfries in southern Prince William County all the way to the northern parts of the District of Columbia every day. And transit isn't a good option for them. They have these really long drives. If you look at this carefully, the thickest line on this entire chart is people who drive from someplace in Fairfax County to a different place in Fairfax County. The second thickest line on here are people driving from some part of Prince William County to a different part of Prince William County. Intra-jurisdictional mobility actually takes up more trips every day than cross-jurisdictional mobility. There's still a lot of trips going from Prince William County up into the District of Columbia, but it shows that our commuting patterns aren't as obvious or as predictable and aren't going to become as obvious and predictable as maybe we would like to think they are, or is that the news and traffic and weather together on the 8s leads us to believe. You always hear about the same accidents every single night on WMAL and WTOP, but traffic's moving all around the region. And the line I find most interesting is people driving from other Virginia to other Maryland. I mean, that means there's someone like going from Culpeper to Howard County. Like, I don't, like, where are they going? It's like, that's a crazy commute. But it's a really complex system we work with. Again, we've divided the region up into 28 subsegments, and you can see the segments are all throughout Northern Virginia. There's no part of our region that's getting ignored, but of course, where there's more population, there's more congestion. And that's where the roads come together. But every corridor on here is something that you've probably driven on here at some point in time in the last few years. Again, $44 billion for 358 projects. And again, it's not a mode-specific plan. 238 of those projects are roadway projects. 99 of them are transit projects. Buses, trains, metro systems. Non-motorized, that's your pedestrian, your multimodal, your bicycle facilities, 51. ITS, those are your ITS and TDM. Those are your technological projects. How do we use technology to make traffic on our existing facilities move better? And if you add those all together, you're going to quickly realize there's more than 358 projects on there. Because many of the projects in this plan are more than just a highway project. They may be a highway project that also includes lanes dedicated for buses. They may be transit improvements that also add additional pedestrian facilities so that we can give people more options. That's what we've heard over and over again in our surveys. People want solutions, but they recognize that the solution isn't fix one thing and hope it works. It's address as many problems as you can, as quickly as you can, so we have more choices to take the car on Monday, take Metro on Tuesday, carpool on Wednesday, telework on Thursday. There we go. This chart is really hard to read, so I'm not going to go over it a lot, but what it shows is if we were to build all $44 billion worth of projects, which we're not going to, then the right-hand column shows you what the change is in congestion. And this is really key. If we were able to build all of these projects, this is no build versus full build, right? So this isn't current, well, left-hand column is current conditions. The middle column is if we don't build anything. The projects that we're doing right now, we finish them and we stop. The third column is if we built everything in this plan. It compares these numbers between the no-build option and the plan option. The number of motorized trips goes up only about 1%. So if we could fully develop this plan, we would actually be, as population grows, not dramatically changing the number of trips we take. But what's really interesting, look at some of these numbers. If we could build all of these plans, transit crowding would reduce by 64%. What does that indicate? It indicates that we've got a lot of transit systems that are probably right at the edge of their capacity and can't afford to take anymore. We need to make some big investments there. Hours of delay could be reduced by 44%. Our goal is to acknowledge, since we can't do all of these things, which of these projects can we best move us in this direction of positive change? Now let me say, the transportation nerd in me, and those of you who know me know I've become a pretty big transportation nerd over the last few years, loves this chart because it shows a lot of data in a very graphical way. The commuter in me hates this chart. I'm going to describe to you why I hate it. And who here likes Star Wars? We got some Star Wars fans here? Oh, please raise your hand. I'm going to look really dumb. Supervisor Meyer, thank God we got a Star Wars fan here. All right, if you don't like Star Wars, you're not going to understand this. The picture on the left, if you like Star Wars, this reminds me of the planet Mustafar, which is the planet where Anakin Skywalker fell into the lava and became Darth Vader, because it's bright red. It's like a lava planet, and all of you've seen these maps before. The darker the color, the worse the congestion is. And if you see, if we don't make any more, if we just stop making transportation investments, 95, 495, sections of 66, big chunks of Route 7, they don't just turn red, they turn dark purple. Things get really, really bad. But here's the part that I don't like about it. The one in the middle, that's the planet Tatooine. That's the one that Luke Skywalker lived in when the droids found him and took him to meet Princess Leia, who turned out to be his sister. It's still kind of a desert. It's not lava, but it's still pretty hot. If we build all of the projects in this plan, and our population grows at the rate we think it's going to grow, and our job creation grows at the rate we think it's going to go, there are still some places at $44 billion that we've got some pretty serious congestion problems. Big parts of this plan aren't about fixing the problem. They're just about stopping it from getting a lot worse. And that can be a little disheartening, because we've got a lot of staff in this room who work really hard to make it better. And at some level, we all know that as long as we continue to be a robust and prosperous economy in this region, we're going to continue to have some transportation problems no matter how much money we spend. The good news is, the map on the right, this isn't what it's going to look like, but this is what I call my planet Endor chart. That's the planet that the Wookiees lived on. It's covered in trees. The green, what did I say, the Wookiees? Well, the Wookiees were there too. There were Wookiees. The forest moon, it wasn't a planet. The forest moon of Endor, where the Ewoks lived. Although they never call them Ewoks in the movie. This does not show what it's going to be like. I know you're all looking at that green and going, look how great it's going to be. That's not how good it's going to be. What that is that's the delta. The darker the green, the better the improvement was. So the point is, things we'll never get to awesome. But there are some areas where we can make some really dramatic improvements. There are some opportunities to make some dramatic improvements to either how much better it will be, or at least how much worse it won't be. So there are some great projects out there that can really make a big difference for us. Now, this is the other chart that you absolutely can't read, but this is the 28 segments ranked by their performance rating. The higher the score, the more opportunity there is to relieve congestion. Just because there's an opportunity to relieve congestion doesn't mean we can afford to relieve the congestion. And all of these numbers will later have to be evaluated in the context of their cost. A project that has a really high score, but also has a really high cost, might not ultimately be as important to us as a region as something that performs a little less well, but is dramatically less expensive to build. And that goes back to the point I made earlier. There are a tremendous number of projects. We all know there's a huge need for improvement in this region. But there is nothing in this plan that will solve all of the problems. Indeed, most of the things in this plan won't solve any problems because we don't have the money to build them. And even the things we can do will in some cases only serve to help us keep up with traffic because of our limited funding. But when you look at the plan, don't assume that something's in the plan is going to get built, because even though you might be excited about it, but also don't assume that it's going to be built even if you're afraid that it's going to be built. So there's a lot more decisions to make, but this data is going to play an important role in it. Now, the thing we get asked about the most, and we have the slide in here, and we actually did this work because this is the question we get asked the most. There's 100 variations on it, but they usually start with, what about Uber? What if everyone starts taking Uber? What if we have flying cars? And don't laugh, I get asked like every week, what happens if someone invents flying cars? I actually made a case with somebody that it might be more cost effective to invent flying cars than it would be to expand Metro to Woodbridge. I get asked all the time about Metro to Woodbridge. I think cheap flying cars might be a faster option available to us. So what we did is, I talked about the assumptions that we made. And then what we did after we made these assumptions and developed this plan, we went back and we looked at 4 alternative scenarios. These aren't scenarios we believe will happen. These are scenarios that we believe might happen. One of them is technology makes driving easier. If we had flying cars, how much better would traffic get? What I'll share with you is, if we have dramatic changes in driving technology, and it certainly seems like we're on the brink of it, the plan gets so much better that some of the facilities become no longer needed. We actually could find ourselves in a situation where, probably not flying cars, but let's say this thing we've all seen where everyone kind of rides in car pods and the pods kind of stick together and there's no space between the cars, things can move faster. Looks really cool in the videos. Things like that could actually cause us to reduce the amount of investment we need to make. Unfortunately, no one in this room is in a position to be able to invent those things, but we know it makes a big difference. Changes in travel behavior. This is really important. What happens if people just stop going as many places? The real test of this was, do you remember the day the Pope came about a year ago? And all the federal employees were told, stay home, traffic's going to be terrible, the Pope's going to be here. If you did go out, traffic was not terrible at all. If everyone could find a way to stay home and telework, we would need dramatically less investment. We don't think that's our likely outcome, but we want to be prepared for it. A lot of this plan assumes that we're going to have more concentrated land use, that as our population grows bigger, more and more people are going to live in urban areas around transit centers. More people living in apartments and condos, more people living close to where those buses or those trains are. If that doesn't happen, if in fact people continue to move to the cities as quickly as they move to the suburbs, as quickly as they move to the country, well, more people will have to drive farther. But what's interesting is there's still a lot of opportunities to improve our network, even if that happens. We also looked at concentrated land use growth. What happens if everybody moves to transit centers and we start abandoning the suburbs? Got a lot of realtors who are really concerned about that would happen. But not surprisingly, some of these facilities become less important. Some of these investments become much more valuable. And the point of all this was that we know that our assumptions will be wrong. They're just the best assumptions we have. So we now have data, and this is really the first time this has ever been done. We now have data that lets us look back in 5 or 10 years and say, you know what? Things aren't happening the way we thought they would. So let's start making amendments to this plan based on the predictions that we made of what would be our outcomes if those happens. So it becomes a much more flexible and a much more robust plan because of it. We have findings. We talk about the things that the report tells us we should do. I'm not going to go through them all because none of them are going to come as a surprise to you. We should pursue targeted, multimodal, regionally coherent strategies to address the region's transportation needs, consistent with the region's priorities and the varying geographies of the region. A lot of commas in that sentence, but the answer sort of is duh. Of course we should do that. The whole point of having this authority is to make sure we're making the right investments in the right places. And the other key point on this slide is, and I said it before, there is no single project, there is no program, there is no policy that will fix all of our problems. What we now know, we've always sort of known it. We now have the empirical data to say there's no silver bullet. We get asked, everybody in this room gets asked, why don't you just build X? Why don't you just widen this road? Why don't you just add more transit here? And the answer is maybe we should, but just doing that thing will not solve all of the problems. Got a few next steps. This list of next steps keeps getting shorter every time we do this presentation. Tonight is our open house and public hearing. Thank you for being here. We're going to open up for comments in a minute. Our public comment period stays open through July 23rd, so we got about another 10 days. You can make comments tonight. You can give us comments in writing. You can visit our website, www.nvtatransaction.org. I've been saying that a lot over the last few months. You can provide comments there. Most importantly, you can tell your friends and neighbors. What I love about nvtatransaction.org is this. If you've ever wondered, who do I complain to about traffic? The answer is that website. Go to that website, complain about traffic, and Monica, our executive director, and her staff will actually read it and try to do something about it, which we've all complained about traffic for years. Now there's someone to complain to through this website. The next big step, and frankly the part that a lot of people pay more attention to, so we're glad there's a lot here tonight, is we're going to adopt the plan in October, but what we're going to do that very night, once we adopt this plan, we're immediately going to say, jurisdictions, transit agencies, tell us what projects in this plan you would like to see us build over the next 6 years. And between October of this year and spring of 2018, we'll begin developing our first 6-year plan, where we're able to look really farther into the future and say, what are the investments, what are the projects that are close to being completed that we need to put a little more money into to get them finished? What are the projects that haven't started yet but desperately need to be started? Each of you knows what those projects are because you probably drove on one of them this evening. And the plan is that in June, we're going to adopt about $1 billion worth of additional transportation investment, a plan for about $1 billion worth of transportation investment here in Northern Virginia. Well, these are just addresses. I probably said all of these. And with that, I thank you for your time. I love talking about my region, so I apologize if I've talked too long, because we really want to hear from you. So I'm going to go sit down, and then we're going to start our public hearing. And I got to turn these microphones off or you'll hear me chewing. So. Oh. All right. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up speakers. I'm going to announce the speaker, and I'm going to announce the person that comes after that. So if you're speaking, please come up to the podium. If you are the person after that, please kind of stand in the on-deck circle so we're ready for you. You've probably done this before or seen it. They gave me 2 microphones. I feel like I'm done. We're going to ask everyone to limit their comments to 3 minutes. There's a timer. When the green light goes on, your time begins. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left, 30 seconds left. Green light means 30 seconds. When the yellow light comes on, you got 30 seconds. 30 seconds. And then when the red light comes on, that's your wrap it up. I'm not going to cut you off in the middle of the sentence, but I'm going to cut you off at the next sentence. Please start. I'm going to introduce you, but please say your name at the beginning just so we make sure we've got the right speaker. And also, please tell us where you're from, what county, city, or town you live in, so we know who we're hearing from tonight. If you have a written copy of your testimony, please give it to the clerk so we can enter that into the permanent record as well. As always, we're going to start with our elected officials who are here this evening, and we have 2, we have 3. Oh, fantastic. Okay. So our first speaker is going to be Supervisor Ron Meyer, and he's going to be followed by Mayor Roger Vance.
All right. I'll submit my written copy a little bit later. When I knocked doors in my district in 2015, and people who know this who've run for office, usually you get about 15 seconds to grab people's attention. And instead of just introducing myself, usually what I'd say is I'd introduce myself and say, hey, I'm Ron Meyer. I'm running for the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors here in the Broad Run District. The one thing I'm running on is to make sure you don't have to pay $6 each way every day or not be stuck on Waxpool Road. And that 15 seconds right there would grab people's attention to have a full conversation with me. And as elected officials, I think we know how sometimes at the door it's hard to grab people. The problem we have in Loudoun County, especially in the Ashburn area, but going up and down the Greenway, is that right now there's a monopoly in place, and either you have two choices. You can pay $6 each way every day, which amounts to, on average, thousands of dollars for the average family that goes out of their college savings accounts for their kids, out of their retirement funds, into the Greenway. Or you could be stuck on Waxpool Road, which can add up to a half hour to your trip. And so tonight, and throughout this process, you all have a chance to really make a major impact on making people's lives better. And so what did that accomplish, those 15 seconds? As far as the results, as far as what the voters said, the district that I hold as a Republican, Hillary Clinton just won by 60%. People on the same ballot as I did in my same party lost the precincts that I represent by more than 25% at times, depending on the race. And so it was this message, it certainly was not my resume that projected me into Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, but it's really not about votes, because all of you have to decide, not just for my broad run district, but for the region. Why does these projects matter? I'm talking about Shellhorn Road, I'm talking about Prentice Drive. Shellhorn Road's our number one priority. And here's why, because it's not just about getting people off the Greenway, because that has certainly you're gonna relieve congestion on Waxpool Road, but allaying tolls obviously isn't one of your criteria. But this is why it is a regionally significant project. And it's certainly going to, I think, score well with congestion. But the other thing you have to remember is this. This road will be a direct connection to Loudoun's newly opened in 2020 Labor Day stations for the Silver Line. It'll be a direct shot from Route 28 to both of these stations, whereas right now you have to go in a roundabout fashion, either on Waxpool Road or the Greenway, or through a really crazy way if you want to come from the south, to get to these stations. If we want to make transit accessible, if we want people to use transit, if we want people to use Metro, if we want Loudoun's investment in Metro to be successful, this road must be built, and frankly, it must be built before, as soon as possible, but ideally around when Metro opens. And that's why it's not just a priority, I hope it's an urgent priority. Lastly, what I'll say is this, is people have said we need to buy the Greenway. The Greenway has more than $1 billion in debt. We've looked at plans to do that. Right now, it's not feasible because we have to take on that debt for a road that the county now values at around $300 million. We have sued them to oblivion, and their legislation that controls what governs them is up in 2019, and that should be reformed. This is the only answer. We have to build Greenway alternatives. I appreciate your support tonight.
Next up, we have Mayor Roger Vance, followed by Delegate Bob Marshall.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Roger Vance, Mayor of the town of Hillsborough in northwest Loudoun County, and I'm pleased to speak in support of the NVTA's draft transaction plan. I do want to highlight one of the identified needs and a unique opportunity for a timely solution. That need is to mitigate the growing congestion on the Route 9 corridor in western Loudoun. It's part of segment 1-1 on your project list. As the draft plan notes, the Route 9 corridor is a major commuter artery that feeds tens of thousands of Loudoun, West Virginia, and Maryland motorists to Loudoun, Fairfax, Arlington, Prince William, and DC. Traffic on the Route 9 corridor will grow significantly in the coming years, exacerbating an already intolerable level of congestion. Route 9's congestion results in poor performance in commute time and person hours of delay. Acute congestion virtually paralyzes this corridor during morning, late afternoon, and evening commuter rush hours. We're also seeing increased weekend congestion resulting from the agro-tourism boom in western Loudoun, which now has Virginia's largest concentration of wineries, farm breweries, and the newest Virginia State Park. Hillsborough's congestion hotspot is the single biggest threat to this thriving rural economic activity. If people can't get there, they won't go there. The draft plan clearly identifies this problem and includes a project to solve it. The Route 9 hotspot, safety improvements, and traffic calming project is now shovel-ready, with construction starting 1 year from today. More than 50% of the necessary funding is already secured. The project aligns with NVTA goals, keeps traffic moving, reduces person hours of travel and delay. It incorporates a pair of roundabouts, in-town traffic calming and pedestrian safety features, and a multimodal trail. What we need is the funding to build the pair of roundabouts. We have the funding for the rest of the project. We only want to dig up this heavily traveled corridor once. I urge the board to commit to the funding now to ensure construction is completed as part of the in-town Hillsborough phase. It's good governance to build all phases of this project together. We will save millions in costs, leverage multiple fund sources from across jurisdictions, avoid years of repeated disruption to this critical corridor, and facilitate economic development. This project can be built in the next 3 years, and this problem in the West will be addressed. Please consider funding the Route 9 corridor project now. Thank you.
Speaker is going to be Delegate Bob Marshall, and I'm going to take some personal privilege and jump his wife Kathy Marshall to the front of the line.
Mr. Chairman, is this on? Oh. I'm glad you're sitting down, and you and your colleagues, because I finally want to thank you for something. It is the study that you and the VDOT are doing to address the congestion on Route 28 in Yorkshire. I checked with VDOT. The last time the comp plan was changed by the Prince William supervisors was 1976, 41 years ago, a long time. Now, I do have one objection to a project you have on here, and that happens to be the Bi-County Parkway. From that standpoint, Mr. Chairman, it is Christmas in July for developers because they are eager for public subsidies to open up areas in Prince William for more residential development, clearly outside of existing infrastructure and other public facilities. If all you really want to do is move vehicles north and south between Route 50 and Loudoun to Prince William, widen 28 or build the old Tri-County Parkway connection, the old one. Neither widening 28 nor constructing the Tri-County would require significant investments of infrastructure. The Bi-County does because as soon as it happens, zoning is going to change. Do any developers oppose the Bi-County Parkway? I doubt it. Do any developers support the Tri-County? Again, I doubt that. The proposed Bi-County Parkway cuts through rural areas rather than improves transportation in the development areas as the original Tri-County alignment or 28 would do. The Bi-County proposal appears to be yet another dismantling of Prince William's rural crescent, along with bringing Amazon to Prince William and allowing its data center to locate 6 miles outside of an industrial zoned area. How is any of this compatible with the Prince William Comprehensive Plan? Mr. Chairman, in 2016, Prince William supervisors removed the Bi-County Parkway from the comp plan. You are appointed to represent Prince William on the NVTA, yet a majority of the supervisors do not want this road, nor do their constituents. Why is this even mentioned? Because the Bi-County also requires closing Route 29 and 28 in the Bennell Field. You'll be adding even more cars to I-66, which will soon have one less non-tolled lane in each direction because Governor McAuliffe is giving 2 lanes of I-66 to Ferrovial, the Spanish toll road company which bankrupted toll roads in Texas and Indiana and whose executives have been involved in major bribery scandals. VDOT said in 2015 it was no longer pursuing federal programmatic agreements and environmental approvals, which led Prince William Chair Stewart to announce the Bi-County Road is effectively dead. I'd like to know who put the Bi-County Road in this mix of NVTA projects, and please consider this a FOIA request for that information. Supporters of the Bi-County proposal will come in for a rough examination by reporters because it does not appear that all the cards on the table. Keeping the Bi-County Road on your list will diminish trust and confidence in voters in the road funding projects. Closing comments in July for a vote in October is a scheme to fatigue public input, not facilitate it. Hey, not bad, huh? Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Marshall from Manassas, and I too am glad that you've undertaken a joint study with VDOT for improvements to Route 28 through Yorkshire and Manassas Park from Liberia Avenue to the Fairfax County line. Fairfax is slated to widen to 3 and possibly 4 lanes, their portion of Route 28 that is not already 3 lanes. This is by far the most traffic congested road in Prince William County, crawling at less than 10 miles per hour average during rush hour. Yet despite this fact, the road has not been prioritized by either the local governing body or the NVTA until the recent study. Instead, many additional, very dense developments that feed onto Route 28 have been approved, including some 400 apartments right on 28, roughly 150 homes at Caden Ridge, another 175 homes at Richmond Station. This does not include the 613 residences approved in Manassas Park since 2012, despite Route 28 being the main thoroughfare. Other projects, including 400 homes at the corner of Liberia Avenue and the Prince William Parkway, are also under consideration in the Route 28 corridor. When will the poor commuters be treated with the respect they deserve? My point, increasing taxes, creating new transportation authorities, imposing $92 a day hot lanes on I-66 will not solve our traffic woes so long as localities keep adding to dense developments. I find it mind-boggling that the transportation impact analyses developers are required to submit when they apply to the county for a new development study only the development's impact along the perimeter of the development. There's no requirement to study wider impact on nearby or major arteries. Who does that benefit? The developer. No wonder we have gridlock in Northern Virginia. Prince William County is looking at yet another development of 400 homes, which will change our comprehensive plan in the semi-rural crescent. The semi-rural crescent calls for one house per 2.5 acres. Stanley Martin wants 400 homes, mostly townhomes, on the semi-rural parcel of roughly 50 acres. This change was initiated for study by the supervisors. Unfortunately, of the 50-plus projects that required supervisor initiation before changing Prince William County's comprehensive plan, only one was ever denied. So much for our comprehensive plan controlling growth. The reason I bring this up is because traffic is tied to development pure and simple. The more dense developments approved by localities, the greater the road gridlock. Really quickly, if the NVTA decides to build a bi-county parkway in spite of the fact that the Prince William supervisors took it off their comprehensive plan, then taxpayers will pay for a road to help developers and add to the traffic congestion. This is the exact opposite of what the NVTA was supposed to do. These developments will, of course, benefit the huge foreign conglomerates. Anyway, thank you.
Next, I'm sorry to announce this. First, we next have Jen Bingle, will be followed by Richard Sampson. Before you go up, I'm getting the sign that people are having a hard time hearing the people at the mics. The mic is off. I'm sorry, I don't mean that. I asked you to come up and then I cut you off. We're gonna try to
Moving it closer.
Okay.
Start speaking.
All right, thank you.
I'm getting something over these speakers, so we're gonna try to figure out what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear it now? All right, getting thumbs up.
All right.
Yeah, Jen Bingle, your turn.
My name is Jem Bingle. I am field staff in Loudoun County for the Piedmont Environmental Council, and I speak in that role this evening. To accomplish your goals to reduce congestion and move the greatest number of people in the most cost-effective manner, we believe that and do not support that new Potomac Bridge crossings, including Route 28, Project 24, or the Bi-County Parkway, Project 226, will accomplish the goal. Traffic studies and analysis of employment data for Loudoun, Fairfax, Prince William, Arlington, Alexandria, and the other Northern Virginia jurisdictions do not justify the cost of these projects relative to the benefits. Instead, we support funding for projects that solve the problems on existing travelways and support Metro to help existing traffic congestion problems without inducing new problems. The vast majority of Northern Virginia residents live and work locally within their jurisdictions, as you had said, or travel east-west to work in the inner suburbs or the district. Projects such as 61, I'm just going to give you numbers, 120, 121, 153, 192, 233, 240, 234 would help more than that, those projects. And as a long-term and regional solution, funding for Metro to serve Northern Virginia residents and businesses most effectively is key. Businesses desire Metro as the attractive location to locate in. In Loudoun, that means building missing road links that create a more complete network around the Metro stations and help residents to get to Metro from the neighborhoods. It also involves ensuring that transit is in place to make choosing Metro a viable option. In other words, more buses and bus service. Projects such as number 10, 14, 16, 17, 45, 100, 149, 150, 161, I could go on, will help those goals. Loudoun has been working through construction of its list of intersection improvements and missing links for a few years now, which is wonderful. We still have a long way to go with funding support from organizations like this. A bridge over the Potomac or the Bi-County Parkway will swamp the improvements that have been made already with unexpected and unaccounted for traffic that will quickly destroy the gains and waste the time, effort, and tax dollars spent to date. They'll also destroy communities in Loudoun and Prince William and endanger valuable regional natural resources. Please reject those projects that would cost more than they deliver and create new problems in the process. Thank you.
Next up is Richard Sampson, who will be followed by June Lane.
Good evening. I'm Richard Sampson. I'm a resident of the town of Herndon. I'm also a member of the Herndon Parkway Advisory Committee, although my comments here tonight are my own. I address you today in support of many items on the project list of the draft transaction plan that would be substantially beneficial to our town's growth, sustainability, and quality of life. Mindful of NVTA's responsibilities to improve travel times, connect activity centers, improve safety and air quality, and move the most people, I specifically express my support for the bulk of the projects in corridor segment 1-3 and want to speak to a few of them specifically. 1-3 is about halfway down the list of prioritized rating list on in the transaction plan. Specifically, we're interested in projects 8 and 18 that do a good job connecting across the toll road to help facilitate movement of cars and pedestrians once the metro opens. 13 to improve bike and pedestrian access at the Herndon Metro Rail Station. 14 to improve transit connections on the forthcoming Silver Line. 20, the Davis Drive extension, which is a missing link that the previous speaker just spoke to between Loudoun County and the metro station that would not only benefit Loudoun, but parts of Herndon and Fairfax County. 32, light rail or BRT from Dulles to Manassas, very interesting to folks on the western side of Fairfax County. 100, metro rail fleet expansion. 123, and much needed improvement of the Fairfax County Parkway Sunrise Valley interchange. And 300, express bus service between Reston and Franconia Springfield. I personally oppose Project 1-3, number 166, to widen the recently reopened Innovation Avenue, which will only rush development to this new greenfield development, a stretch of road that currently has not a single business, building, or residence on it, already talking about widening it. That's absurd. Inclusion of these and other project segments to enhance the capacity in transit, bike, and pedestrian facilities are crucial to the viability of both Herndon as well as the region as a whole, in addition to the road network. I also expressed concern about 2 projects that had the potential to reduce congestion and provide alternatives in Herndon that were not included on the draft list. Reconstruction projects of South Eldon Street and Sterling Road in the town of Herndon. Our advisory committee has unanimously recommended that the MVTC incorporate these projects into the draft plan. I urge this body to consult our town staff in Herndon as well as the town council on the importance of these projects to our town. Thank you for your time and consideration. To hope to see a number of projects in segment 1-3 included on the final incorporated plan. Thank you.
This is June Lane. She's followed by Eric Rubajak. Something close?
Good evening. My name is June Lane, and I'm a 46-year resident and business owner in Loudoun County. During my time here, I have watched roads being built, roads being widened, new interchanges going in, yet the traffic gets worse and worse. Push poll data from the Alliances of Special Interest supposedly reveal that people's top priority is congestion reduction. That has led the NVTA to the conclusion that the only solution is more and wider roads and perhaps a big new bridge across the Potomac. The survey respondents were only answering the questions they were asked. They were led by the questions to responses that are congruent with what the special interests already wanted to do. Had they been presented with other ideas and solutions, the outcome would likely have been far different. A review of the transaction plan for 2030 shows a few multimodal enhancements. Examples were a light rail line between Manassas and Dulles Airport and enhancements to the bike trail network, if you could call it that. From what I can see, nothing has been done other than building and enhancing roads. More and wider seems to be the motto. A 2003 Loudoun County study identified the main problem with bike transport is that the trails don't connect. While there have been a few improvements, they still don't connect. The result is that residents can ride for a mile or two and then either walk or take their lives into their hands on crowded roads without bike lanes. We know the old saying that if your only tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I noted that in this plan for Northern Virginia, there was absolutely no out-of-the-box thinking with regard to lowering traffic altogether, in addition to moving it more efficiently. Instead of transporting people to work, could the developers among us build work centers at strategic locations, say in every new development, so people can commute a very short distance and telework? I don't see anything in the plans that are aimed at helping reverse commuters and businesses who would like to locate in Loudoun, Fairfax, but want to be near transit. Bike trail linkages to metro stations are in a number of current strategic plans, but have yet to be realized and are missing from the new plan altogether. A 2003 Bike Pedestrian Master Plan for Loudoun County requested connections from the W and OD Trail to Dulles Airport, both for passengers and for airport employees. It has not been built, and that's only a few miles. With the exception of a couple of parking lots and a few buses, your draft plan is woefully lacking in transit and multimodal projects that would help us to make our future Silver Line connections successful. This is typical of the history of NVTA so far. Make sure that other options are under-resourced and then point out that they don't work and then build more roads. Let's change this by laying aside that hammer and really looking at a variety of solutions. I urge you to respond to what you admit is a consensus around Metro, remove the expensive and disastrous new bridge project from your plan, and replace it with some real alternatives for sitting in traffic. Thank you.
Next have Eric Robajok. Eric M. What we got? Okay, now I guess the next person would be Jim Lautner. And Jim will be followed by Rob Whitfield.
Good evening. My name is Jim Routner, and I'm a small business owner and a resident in Sterling. Project 24, the Outer Potomac River Crossing, is an enormously expensive alternative that benefits big developers, corporations, and Dulles, but it saddles Virginia taxpayers with a never-ending burden. This project is being pushed by development and large business interests at the expense of Virginia citizens, particularly the residents and commuters in Loudoun. The NVT Authority is using responses from surveys that were paid for by the NVT Alliance and the Maryland Suburban Transportation Alliance and similar groups to justify the project. The proponents of the crossing are hawking this as the push-pull is this is what people want. And they're managing to sell the idea that the problem of traffic congestion can be solved by creating more traffic. And no one is questioning their assumptions because they are carefully engineering who they and their constituencies hear from. The real purpose of this project is to increase freight traffic to Dulles, use eastern Loudoun as a cut-through between Montgomery and Fairfax, and explode development on the Maryland side of the bridge. Now, some of these proponents own property on both sides of the proposed bridge. Some stand to gain from acquiring or consolidating business and customers on one side or the other. Many companies from outside of the region completely want to build over the agricultural reserve. Now, some have been spending significant sums over the past few years purchasing political advocacy here in Virginia, and they're now poised to do the same in Maryland in 2018. Proponents of this new bridge are telling us that it will carry 100,000 trips per day, but they fail to point out that much of this is induced traffic. The east-west routes will not be able to handle what they describe as tens of thousands of new car and truck trips induced by this new bridge. The north-south Route 28 will be widened, and it will become an interstate, if not in reality, in terms of being named interstate, it'll function like one. Loudoun County taxpayers will have to foot the bill for massively increased congestion, pollution, and public safety problems forever. Eastern Loudoun and parts of western Fairfax will basically become inner cities bounded on all sides by highways full of idling cars. There are better options for relieving congestion and reducing travel times that should be focused on to improve the daily trips of Northern Virginia residents, most of who either live and work in the same county, the county right next door, or commute to DC. Ensuring the full funding, health, and connectivity of our regional transit systems will do more to address real future transportation needs. That has overwhelming public support, but we never seem to get it all done. Project 24 is a bridge to gridlock. We urge you to remove it from the plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Runner. Next we have Rob Whitfield, who will be followed by Carol Kearney.
Good evening, Chairman Noe, and thank you, board members. I was the only person on the bus from Merrifield Station to get here at 5:30 tonight. How many others came by the bus? So I came actually out from the WMATA board meeting today, and the good news is that Metro is making some finally much-needed progress in its maintenance and repair program, but there's a lot to be done. And whereas the NVTA is funding certain projects, sadly we face regionally a huge $25 billion plus bill over the next decade, which dwarfs even what you guys are probably proposing. So let's go back to 4 years ago when the last TransAction plan, I was one of a dozen people who showed up in Falls Church in 2012 along with Bob Chase. Anybody else there in the Falls Church High School? And so there's a lot of progress has been made. Look at the situation here tonight versus where you were in 2012. So thank you for the progress. And thank you for the progress on 28, where you more or less completed the widening of Route 28 in Fairfax and Loudoun County. But there are projects. I went down to pick somebody up at Reagan Airport at 11 p.m. last night, and as I went past the Pentagon to take the turning to Reagan, I couldn't help but notice Boundary Channel Drive was dark. The only thing you could hear was crickets. And yet that project was funded in your first round of funding, and I don't know whether there's anything happening there. So one of my proposals would be that there be a time limit of 5 years in which you either use the money or give it back to NVTA. We need to define what should be termed regional priorities versus local priorities. As to the projects proposed here, I got to tell you this is a very complicated process. I was at the meeting last night. Monica corrects me when I get something wrong. I think we're talking in terms of segments rather than projects, she tells me. So it's hard for the public to understand some of these concepts. There is something called performance-based planning, which I only found out about this at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So the public doesn't understand how this process applies in setting priorities. So I'm going to reserve, I will submit comments in writing, but thank you for the progress, but we need to make the process simpler for the public to understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Next to Carol Kearney, followed by William Fisher.
Good evening. My name is Carol Kearney. I'm a native resident of this area. I was born and bred here. And I'm also a business owner in Loudoun County. And I thank you all for all the hard work you're doing on this, because this really is a complicated topic. I think I'd like to change my topic to say how much worse it won't be. I love the way you said that, and I think that's fabulous. I am really against the new bridge crossing the Potomac going in anywhere. I think it would really add to the traffic problems that we already have. It just seems that traffic would worsen incredibly. Let's first consider the graphic that you said you liked so much. It's kind of like this. If you look at these lines, the main thing we're seeing is being a cross through Loudoun County, and I don't think that's what any of us want. It also shows going directly to Fairfax. It's very hard to see the smaller lines where it would really make a difference to the folks in Loudoun. It would just add additional traffic, hundreds of thousands of cars. Route 7 between Leesburg and 28, a lot more cars, would be a mess there. Right now, it is getting better there. I go up and down through Leesburg in that area all the time. We are making progress. If we add 100,000 more cars to that, we will have rewritten everything we've done. Route 7 between 28 and Tyson's, a new bridge would make that even more impossible than it is right now trying to get into Tyson's from Loudoun County or any of those areas. The Loudoun County Bi-County Parkway, again, a bridge is really going to undo the things that we've worked so hard and that we're going through and that the improvements we are making. From Route 28 to 66 and Route 7, that is already such a mess. We really don't want to do that either. 100,000 new cars and freight trucks per day onto Route 28 is not going to help with congestion there. This is bridge to gridlock. If you build, they will come, and we'll be paying for it forever. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Kearney. Next, we have William Fisher, who will be followed by David Heggie.
Good evening. My name's William Fisher. I'm a resident of Loudoun County, and I'm going to address a few of the many myths and misconceptions that are being cited as facts by those who are in favor of a new bridge across the Potomac River between Route 28 and I-270. Myth number one, a new bridge across the Potomac will reduce traffic congestion in Loudoun County. A new bridge is not going to reduce traffic on Route 7 or Route 28. It's going to actually increase it. And it'll increase it because the through truckers that come up from Route 66 and Route 81 are going to use it as a way to cut out distance. They're going to use it as a way to get to I-270. And this is going to create a tremendous amount of traffic on Route 28, which is already heavily congested. Clearly, this is going to make our commutes worse rather than better. Myth number two, most of Montgomery and Loudoun County residents want a new bridge. There's no evidence that this is true. Bridge proponents cite results from clearly biased and scattered polls. What is being heard is being carefully engineered to deceive. So what about the people who will lose their homes and neighborhoods to a bridge or to the noisy, pollution-belching ring of highways that will destroy their communities? What about the people who will see what little open spaces and parkland is left turned into a concrete jungle or more development? What about the people who see their commute times double or triple due to increased traffic that they would never encounter unless this bridge is built? I could easily construct a study that will prove to you that the numbers are decisively against a new bridge. Myth number three, more jobs for Marylanders, therefore more employees for Virginia employers. How does this benefit our Virginia residents who wisely chose to live and work in the same locality? How does this reduce traffic on our roads? How does this help our tax base here in Virginia? It doesn't. It does the opposite. Myth number four, the bridge is an escape route for D.C. This myth was suggested at a Loudoun County Supervisors meeting, and this is ridiculous. The escape route from D.C. is to the west, not across a north-south channel in Loudoun County. Myth number six, I could go on, but here's the final myth. A new bridge is the best solution. Absolutely not. Not only because of the above issues, but also because of cost, congestion, pollution, noise, limited benefit to residents, habitat disruption, neighborhood destruction, and so many, many more detriments that this will cause. Frankly, I question the wisdom of a new bridge across the Potomac, and I think you should also. And I think you should seriously question the motives of anyone who's in favor of one. The arguments in favor have been conjured up by special interest groups, mainly developers, and sold to an audience reluctant to question them who have been sitting in traffic. They have been sitting in traffic because of poor demand management and even weaker planning. The arguments for a new bridge to be exposed for what they are, nonsense.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Next, we have David Heggie, say that right? And followed that would be Thomas Duke.
I'm David Hagee from Vienna, just outside the town limits. I've lived in the county since 1970. I'm probably the exception to the other speakers tonight. I'm not asking you to spend more money or fund a particular project. But what I am asking you to do is make some minor but important changes in the way you do your analysis and make decisions. And I think if you don't make those changes, it's going to be impossible to meet two of the objectives. Goal 3, reducing negative impacts on environment and community, and enhancing quality of life. The two affect each other. I think we all agree that health safety is an important aspect of quality of life, and vehicle emissions directly affect health safety for both children and adults. I'm going to leave with you the references for 3 recent reports, one by OSHA, one by National Institutes of Health, the other by National Academy of Sciences that back up that statement. First comment is, you have a lot of metrics, performance measures, but they're not all the same. If you use them equally, you could get to bad decisions. If you were buying a house, you may have an essential requirement. It must have a basement. If it doesn't, move on. But right now, the methodology is looking at them all equally. If one of your chief medical officers came to you this week and said, we've had a significant increase in premature death of infants, it's due to respiratory causes, and we're pretty sure it's due to particulates and emissions, and you came to a meeting like this to decide about the project, I hope you would say, let's skip to the bottom line. Is this plan going to get me back to the threshold for environmental quality and get me below that infantile death rate or not before I consider connections and delays and things like that? So I hope you would consider adding that to your methodology, establishing a threshold for environmental quality and air quality before you consider the other options. The second thing is that when I look at all the performance metrics, and there's a lot of them, they seem to focus on not the aggregated effect. It doesn't seem to look at the cumulative effect of all the vehicles, how much air quality degradation and pollution is being produced. And also land use. Land use seems like it's an obvious choice in addition to widening roads. Land use determines how many cars come from a destination and go to a destination, and that directly impacts the volume of traffic. So what I'm asking for, suggesting is separate the objectives for safety and health from those that relate to economic growth. And also identify some threshold, the ones that are essential, before you consider the other ones. And I would hope that would be ones related to environmental health and quality. Define a minimum threshold for carbon monoxide and particulates and asbestos. And if a plan is not going to get you below that threshold, then move on to the next option. Include a performance metrics for changing in the number of diseases. And also, I hope that you would, I don't know the mix of your background, but I hope that somewhere on the board, someone that represents the interests of the health community that can place that into perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney. Next up, we have Thomas Duke, who will be followed by Audrey Clement.
Good evening. Perhaps I can give you back a little bit of time because I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record. You've heard this before, and I'm going to repeat largely what you've already heard. It is my opinion, I'm a longtime, Thomas Duke, longtime resident of Loudoun County. I've been living here almost 60 years. My opinion, a new Potomac River bridge crossing that connects Loudoun County to Maryland I-270 will completely destroy the rural feel and the quality of life that I and other Loudoun County residents currently enjoy. I want to talk just for a second here about I think most people here are aware of the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance, which I'm going to call the Alliance from now on. They have a lot of interesting information on their website. You've heard it before. They specifically state on their website that no official corridor has been designated for new crossing, yet further state a new crossing should be a 6-lane limited access parkway, and bridge connecting Virginia Route 28 and Maryland I-270. North and west of the American Legion Bridge, so as to more directly link the Reston, Dulles, and Rockville-Gaithersburg areas. In addition, the Alliance states such a facility would carry in excess of 100,000 vehicles per day. If Route 20 is extended to accommodate this crossing, it will almost certainly be designated as an interstate, as you've heard before. I agree with that. Will carry an additional volume of traffic, again, in excess of 100,000. And I note also that on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, in the TransAction plan, specifically Project 24, there is a mention of an outer Potomac River crossing under the column labeled project description. States construct crossing Potomac River between Route 28 and I-270 in Maryland. Again, while I understand that a decision to build the crossing and the location for the crossing hasn't been determined, it does seem as though there is a lot of the same sort of thinking going on, which is why I'm here today. So I have noted here that Virginia has spent, as someone else has said, I believe it's something on the order of 12 to 14 years improving Route 28, which for those of you involved with that, I would like to thank you for that. I think 28 in Loudoun County between Loudoun-Fairfax Line and 7 is much improved. However, if this bridge is built, I think we're going to see those changes evaporate overnight as soon as that bridge and highway to 270 open. I think that, again, the Alliance, if I'd be remiss if I didn't point out again that they've said an additional 100,000 vehicles a day. I think that the Alliance has been around for 30 years. I tend to believe their projections. And if they're saying over 100,000 vehicles, it perhaps is quite a bit north of that. So bottom line, will a new bridge connecting 28 to 270, will it alleviate some of the traffic on I-270 and American Legion Bridge? I think it undoubtedly will. but at what cost? And I think it's going to be a cost of the way of life that we have come to know. Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Duke, before I call Ms. Clement up, you can come on up, but I've just been told that Vienna Town Council member Douglas Noble is here. Did you want to speak tonight?
No, I'm good.
Okay, fantastic. I just don't think you like her. Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Ms. Clement, and she's going to be followed by Sharon Williams.
Welcome, members of the commission, the public, and elected officials. I'm Audrey Clement. I'm with the Arlington Coalition for Sensible Transportation, but I'm speaking on my own behalf as a candidate for Arlington County Board. With the population and employment in Northern Virginia expected to increase dramatically between now and 2040, NVTA has certainly made the case for substantial increases in the region's investment in transportation infrastructure. I am nevertheless concerned about NVTA's lack of transparency. The NVTA project list describes more than 350 projects that qualify for funding, and the accompanying report indicates that each project has been objectively scored according to criteria specified in HB 599, adopted by the General Assembly in 2012 to prioritize transportation projects. The overall scores assigned to sectors within 11 major travel corridors are there, yet no score or cost information is available for the individual projects. Thus, it is impossible to make informed decisions about which projects to fund from the information provided. This should be of particular concern to Arlington officials for two reasons. The report itself indicates that most of the projects are roadway projects, 239 roadway projects pegged at $20 billion, and 99 transit projects pegged at $24.2 billion. Absent a project-level cost-benefit breakdown, the public can only speculate that less than optimal roadway projects will get priority over transit because the cost of each individual roadway project is on average less. This could delay the most effective transit projects, including those targeted for Arlington County, indefinitely. And number two, the roadway projects along the I-66 Segment 6 corridor are likely to dump more traffic in Arlington and D.C., as 74 of the projects on this corridor are roadway and 55 are transit. In any case, the public has been asked to weigh in on a plan without the information needed to comment intelligently. Thus, public comment on TransAction is nothing more than a pro forma exercise required by law with no real purpose or effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clement. Next, we have Sharon Williams, who will be followed by Mark Schultz.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Williams. I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington and a member of VOICE, Virginians Organized for Interfaith Community Engagement. I've been a Metro rider since 1997. I would like to thank you for funding the projects that you are, that you do for Metro and for mass transit. Metro impacts every aspect of my life. I have a 2-hour Metro commute from Sterling to Bailey's Crossroads each day. I have to start out at 4:30 a.m. by walking 2.5 miles to the Loudoun commuter bus at Dulles Town Center at Wheelie Reston, where I board the Silver Line to Ballston. This journey cost me about $300 per month at about $16 a day. When will Metro buses run in Loudoun County? Loudoun County transit is a joke. It's really hard for me to connect with it a lot of the time. Most of the secondary bus lines in Northern Virginia do not fill the gaps for the lack of Metro bus services across the region. And basically, the upcoming bus cuts that have already happened are going to be a real headache for a lot of people who take mass transit. I have to start, as I said, I have to start my day out at 4:30 in the morning, and the buses that run inside the county start at 7 a.m. and I have to be at work at 7:30 a.m. Metro's troubles are going to cost me a lot of money, and they are costing me a lot of money as of June 25th, and there's really no improvement in service. And I recently testified to the Metro Board, and I had to take off time from work in order to do that. And I would really like to have, venues like this to be able to come and talk to politicians like all of you, because I think you need more personal stories like mine. Because you need to see the real people behind the system that you're running at this point. I know many of you probably are not, a part of this system. Yes, you are, but what I'm saying is you're not taking mass transit as what I'm trying to say. And this is a critical issue in my life, as I said, and I would really like to have some buses in Loudoun County. So thank you very much and have a nice day.
Next we have Mark Schuckler, who will be followed by Alan Mushnick.
Mark Scheifler, Prince William County. My main comment tonight, the plan is the plan. I think that it's not simple to understand, but as we move forward, into the call for projects, my recommendation is that the call for projects is really where you want to have the public hearings, because once the project's going to be scored, there's really not that much change to go on. So I encourage you guys to really, the call for projects is really where you need the public input to make wise decisions on how you're going to spend the next $1 billion of taxpayer money. And I also want to stress, land use is probably the most important aspect of transportation. You guys hold the keys to what's the next land use for the county. Marty, you always go back to Orchard Bridge that was passed in 1985, and it's making a big difference now on commutes on Route 28. So, as you guys, as all these projections come out, it really comes down to you guys to really make the decisions, to make smart decisions, so that it's easier to select transportation projects that really are going to make a difference for the residents of Virginia. And and as far as stressing on projects, I think it is important to work between jurisdictions. That's usually where the main bottlenecks are, either between counties and cities or between DC and Maryland. Probably the biggest projects that are need is the American Legion Bridge, a new second Roslyn station, and fixing the crossing across the Occoquan River between Fairfax and County. Those are the major bottlenecks that need to be resolved, and those are major projects, and those are the type of projects that really need a lot of study. And I think this is where the NVTA really can work together and try to solve those major bottleneck problems that are identified by the COG as far as major bottlenecks within the region. So I just encourage you guys to work together to try to help make selecting transportation projects easier and more transparent. Thank you.
Next we have Alan Mushnick, followed by Jerry Ponce.
Good evening, Chairman Noe and members of the authority. I'm Alan Muchnick. I live in the city of Manassas. Speaking on my own behalf today, we're ostensibly discussing a list of 358 projects, which is at least 4 times greater than the amount of funding that's reasonably expected to be available. I don't know how to comment intelligently on them other than to say that project selection and prioritization is key. If we're going to make any progress or not backslide in reducing regional traffic congestion, it's important to select projects that will reduce vehicle miles traveled per capita. In particular, transit projects, ride-sharing projects, and walking and bicycling projects that provide first and last mile connections are really going to make the most difference. And in particular, we need to restore our regional metro rail system to the world-class subway that it should be. Projects that support mixed-use regional activity centers where more people can live, work, and play, and access destinations and other regional activity centers using transit should also be a priority. And what should not be a priority are highway widening projects at the region's periphery, particularly, that will just stimulate more sprawl development and ultimately, and also ultra-long distance commuting from outside the region, which Mr. Noe talked about. The region's biggest highway bottleneck is the American Legion Bridge, or one of them. And although that bridge is in Maryland, the extension of Virginia's I-495 hot lanes to at least the I-270 West Spur should be one of the D.C. region's top transportation priorities, and it should precede any new Potomac River crossings outside the Beltway. One of the biggest omissions that I find in TransAction is the lack of a regional bicycle plan. It's really not too much to ask that NVTA and its localities establish at least one continuous designated bikeway along each of NVTA's regional corridors. Fortunately, much of this regional bikeway network infrastructure already exists, but it's poorly signed and designated. Identifying this long-distance bikeway network, which just like our arterial roads, would also serve short and medium distance trips, such as access to other regional activity centers and transit nodes, would help identify and prioritize gaps in future bikeway network funding. Thank you for your consideration.
We now have Jerry Ponce, followed by David Burtwhistle. Jerry Ponce? No? Okay. Then we go with David Burtwhistle, followed by Kelsey Crane.
Good evening. I'm David Burtwhistle with the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance. The Alliance welcomes the opportunity to comment on the TransAction 2040 plan and process. First off, development of a regional planning process has long been an Alliance-supported priority, and the Alliance commends the authority for continuing this process. The TransAction 2040 plan and process, however, are complex and defy succinct commentary. Of note, the plan embraces many critical regional needs supported by the Alliance, including the Bi-County Parkway, part of a corridor of statewide significance, the Fairfax and Prince William Parkway improvements, upgrades to Route 1, 7, 28, and 50, a wider American Legion Bridge, a new Northern Potomac River crossing, 8-car metro trains, and express bus services. The Alliance believes that the allotment of hundreds of millions of dollars, however, for bicycle, pedestrian, bus, and other projects of essentially local significance is excessive. Also, I-66 and I-95 corridor transit demand can be more cost-effectively met by regional bus service rather than metro rail extensions. In short, the number of projects of true regional significance is much smaller than the 358, and the cost lower than the $30 to $40 billion. In moving forward, the Alliance recommends reducing the number of performance evaluation measures. 15 are too many. More weight should be assigned to congestion, delay, and travel time reductions. Identifying a small group of core regional investments of greatest regional benefit, the completion of which in the next 20 to 25 years will be the primary measure of regional transportation progress. Budgeting for the future, not just spending for the moment. Shovel-ready is not necessarily investment-worthy. Spending every available dollar annually prevents the accumulation of funds for critical out-year projects. As with a child's education, putting aside funds annually for key transportation projects is prudent practice. Advancing the highest performing projects regardless of location because benefits transcend borders. I-66 improvements, for example, benefit Falls Church and City of Fairfax residents far more than small projects within their borders. Stopping calls for more projects once a TransAction plan is adopted. And above all, thinking and acting more regionally. A regional plan must embrace a top-down perspective, not a collection of local plans. In conclusion, While the draft 2040 transaction plan represents an improvement in many areas, the Alliance urges the authority to continue to work hard on these future plans and to assure that our region gets not a list of local wants, but regional transportation plan and network it really needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burtwhistle. We next have Kelsey Crane, followed by Stuart Schwartz.
Hello, Commissioners. Thank you for your time. Move this a little closer, I'm a little shorter. My name is Kelsey Crane. I'm with the Virginia chapter of the Sierra Club. We will be submitting more comprehensive comments on specific plans, but tonight I want to ask that you broadly prioritize funding transit and multimodal projects in the transaction and express continued opposition to an additional Potomac Bridge crossing. Transportation has become the #1 contributor to U.S. carbon dioxide emissions and should be a prime target for major greenhouse gas reductions. There are several proven ways within the transportation sector to address this impact. Clean and efficient vehicles are a big part of that. Lower carbon fuels are also part of that. But what you all can do is create a 21st century transportation system, one that reduces vehicle miles traveled by per person and increases public transit use, fostering compact communities with transportation choices like rail, bus, walking, and biking, and cutting the number of trips that people have to take in their car to get around for their daily lives. We need a transportation system that moves beyond the high volume of single occupancy vehicles powered by oil products and to a vision of a 21st century transportation system that gives Northern Virginia's transportation choices like well-funded and effective public transit, passenger rail, and of all the performance measures that you all have, we need to have one that measures carbon dioxide, greenhouse gas impacts as we're looking at long-term transportation plans. A revitalized transportation system, complete with transit, commuter rail, safe walking and biking paths, can once again create close-knit communities with vibrant local supported economies. Sprawl was not created by accident, but driven by federal policy, model zoning laws, large single-family housing, off-street parking, wide streets, prohibited markets and sidewalks, and bulldozing through existing housing, bought traffic, pollution, and noise. And just as that policy drove sprawl, it can create a 21st century transportation system that reduces greenhouse gas impacts and makes communities more livable. Investments in public transit as well as biking and walking infrastructure can connect jobs, shopping, and living and create clean and convenient alternatives to driving every day. Further combining with strong planning partnerships at the local, regional, and regional level with strong accountability measures will ensure that those policies are followed. Overall, the transaction has too many road widening expansion projects, and several studies have proven that we don't need an additional upper Potomac Bridge crossing between Loudoun and Montgomery County. It will just increase congestion through Leesburg and impact the environment and surrounding conservation areas. As we're making investments for a 21st century transportation system, we must repair existing infrastructures. We can move beyond massive road systems and increase investments in more complete systems with multiple viable options, transit-accessible commerce systems. This reduces greenhouse gas emissions, the cost of operating our vehicles, and will make our region even more attractive to live and work in. Thank you for your time this evening.
Next we have Stuart Schwartz, who will be followed by Kim Homsey.
Thank you. I'm Stuart Schwartz. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition for Smarter Growth. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary of working with conservation groups, business groups, developers, architects, and many others across Northern Virginia and the D.C. region. We appreciate your public service. We appreciate the hard work of the staff in many ways. There's a lot of good information here, but there's still a sense of disappointment, I think, for many of us in our coalition. We're disappointed in the sense that we really didn't do a comprehensive land use transit-oriented development, demand management approach to this puzzle. And we ended up stapling together an awful lot of projects again. At $44 billion, that starts to be a pretty scary number when I think you said you have $6 billion available. And when your price tag has risen from 9.7 to 15.4 to 23.2 to 44. To me, that's a sign we're not going in the right direction, and that demand reduction through smarter land use, through transit-oriented development is critical. Arlington has shown the way. It doesn't all have to be high density like that, but look at what resulted in terms of the reduction in vehicle trips, vehicle miles traveled, the big shift in mode share to walking, biking, and transit. Fairfax County has said transit-oriented development is our future. All the jurisdictions are doing this. The plan for Ashburn is great in Loudoun County. There are plans for Woodbridge. Manassas works. We can continue to create great walkable communities that reduce the amount we have to drive. Instead, this plan seems to result in some pretty long average trip lengths including for non-work trips. We should be looking to reduce those trip lengths, improve local accessibility, and some other people have talked about that. We should have been looking at centers, not corridors, as we did this, and other people just talked about health and climate change. I am as worried as I've ever been about the direction we're going, and I don't see that we're reducing the amount of vehicle miles traveled like we need to be doing and the amount of emissions that we need to be doing. I concur with others that these bridge projects, the Northern Bridge, the Southern Bridge, are disastrous. They will undermine the effort to create walkable, transit-oriented communities. They will open up Montgomery County's Ag Reserve. They will bring thousands more cars into Loudoun County onto those roads when we need to fix the American Legion Bridge. We've had the 2003-2004 Origin and Destination Study, the VDOT 2015 Origin Destination Study. Each of these have shown that those U-shaped commutes are a very small percentage. The American Legion Bridge for L-shaped commutes, the radial trips, that's where some of your big problems are. There's an awful lot of highway expansion and road expansion here. They will divide communities. It looks to me like we're favoring very long distance commutes and not making some shift to shorten trip lengths to link jobs and housing and so forth. So we certainly urge you to reconsider a number of these projects, that you indeed focus on the transit land use connection, the TOD areas and the grids of streets and networks. I mean, there's some good projects in Loudoun County and other places to provide that additional local connectivity that's going to be so important. But I feel like we're still falling short of protecting the future quality of life and environment of Virginia and solving the problem through this plan at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Next up, we have Kim Hosen, who will be followed by Mary Craig.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, Mr. Chairman and the rest of the board. My name's Kim Hosen. I'm with the Prince William Conservation Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization working to support healthy communities for all. And I just want to start out by commenting that I've been to several meetings lately from VDOT and about road improvements, and multiple times, and at every meeting, I've expressed concern and asked questions about a different road segment, and I've been told, oh, don't worry about it. It's never going to happen. That would be too far in the future, which really causes me to wonder why it would be on the plan at all if it's never going to happen. And that is a really bad answer for that. So that I'm a little curious about when a cost-benefit analysis would be done with this, because there's a lot of projects here, not all of them are going to be effective, and some will get a bigger bang for the buck, which for all of us here speaking tonight and looking at the plan, that would be a really important piece of information, and I'm sure that it will come. I really don't know when in the process it will come or what process will be used to evaluate it. And I also want to comment on pollution, concern about pollution, that looking at particulates and trying to reduce air pollution by reducing idling is terrific, but maybe a little bit more than that could be done, especially by prioritizing transit, and also stormwater should be incorporated into the goals, and all these need to be incorporated into the costs. And I will say that roads are a significant contributor in Prince William, and I'm sure elsewhere, to stormwater issues. I also believe it's important to incorporate and honor local planning, and in this particular case, as Mr. Marshall pointed out, notably the Bi-County Parkway, which the county did take out of its comprehensive plan. So I notice it's still in this, as is the alternate, the original Tri-County Parkway. And I believe there is analyses to show that the Bi-County Parkway is maybe something that really wouldn't have the benefits that you would be looking for, especially considering the cost, which makes one wonder why, you would take the time to actually put this in. Another one is a Potomac River Bridge that would be over from Woodbridge, Route 1, to Charles County and connect with 301, which I have also been told, oh, that's there because it's always been there and it's never going to happen, don't worry. It was my understanding that that bridge was now considered to be too far north. It would have to be farther south to actually make a significant difference. So again, it would seem like some of this should be rooted out before it's all put in the plan, so that people aren't kind of willy-nilly going over, oh, I love this, I don't like that, when some of the projects really aren't possible. So that's my time. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and good luck in your evaluation.
Next up, we have Mary Craig, who will be followed by Douglas Stewart.
Good evening. I am Mary Craig from Fairfax County. Mr. Chairman, I listened attentively to your speech and fast clip of rate of speech thereof. What I'm hearing is you are hyped, juiced, and eager to spend lots of money for supposed grand plans. I say we're overtaxed, overcommitted to bonding. For example, if you re-listen to tapes of your speech, notice it's unconstrained design, you say. There's no singular focus, so you must have broad authority, and therefore everything is a go. You said you know your assumptions will and have been wrong. You have data for the last 5 years proving so. Then why should we now trust you or any of these plans? You said no project will solve all the problems, but we're doing it anyway, and this is at a huge cost. What's missing is costs and other analysis to locals, such as my US 1 corridor in Fairfax County area. Report is currently presented not necessarily honest. Where is the frank and explicit talk and analysis regarding A, bypassers from outer rings are being given priority over locals already in place? B, locals lose local flavor and may ultimately be forced or simply choose to relocate even farther out as they hope to retain some semblance of local smaller place. This leads to risk of even more commuting rather than addressing the issue at hand. C, if you expand, especially in outer rings, the risk is population moves farther out, and you end up with repeated problem after alleged progress, and it's too much money. Mr. Chairman, your favorite chart looks like a big hot mess of lots of lines, byways, and long and massive commutes. There's little or no mention of serious negative impacts. You stated it's not about fixing problem, it's simply keeping traffic from getting worse. And this is at what cost to us, did you say? Most of the things in this plan will not help, you say. Adding more someplace to someplace helps us keep up with traffic? Really? I am a prospective store owner in the US 1 ring in Fairfax County. I and other local shopkeepers who do not want to wildly increase the number of too many non-locals speeding through our area and bypassing these local stores, just in the name of expediency. What and where are the true total costs when I or any local store owners lose parking spaces to widen highways? Locals use and support local area stores. They pay taxes and provide revenue of all sorts. And if we comply with your plan, it's leading to more commuting. You've clearly communicated your plans and risks. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you. Oh, and before Douglas goes, I want to say one last chance for some people that didn't come up. Jerry Ponce. Jerry Ponce. Okay. And Eric Maribajak, or Maribach. Hard name to pronounce. Okay. The Shorts bring us home.
Stewart. Yeah.
I said Stewart. No. Mr. Stewart, bring us home.
Thank you, Chairman Noe. My name is Douglas Stewart. I'm a City of Fairfax resident. The total cost of the projects in the transaction plan is about 7 times more than NVTA expects to have available in regional funds between now and 2040. Not surprisingly, the modeling shows improvements under the unconstrained plan, but as you've acknowledged, it's not at all a realistic scenario. We need a better set of scenarios and questions to help guide how the region will invest a finite amount of money to get the most benefits for the transportation network, our economy, and our quality of life. The plan doesn't provide information about costs of the individual or corridor level projects and the benefits relative to those costs. Now, apparently those costs are available under the hood, but they're not available to us. It does make it difficult to have informed input. And we understand the cost estimates are hard to pin down at this conceptual level, but it's tough to use the plan to inform the tough choices you will need to make in turning the plan into 6-year funding programs. One of the best tools NVTA has used is the congestion reduction relative to cost measure. And the question really should be, what projects or packages of projects get the best bang for the buck under the modeling results and the metrics you've chosen? The plan undervalues the fundamental importance of land use and activity centers in making our transportation investments more effective and efficient. During the past 15 years, Northern Virginia and the metropolitan Washington region have moved toward focusing development in more compact, mixed-use communities near transit. These decisions are reaping significant economic benefits as major employers and retail businesses seek to locate in walkable areas near transit. They also significantly mitigate traffic congestion by giving people more alternatives. In such an economically dynamic region, traffic congestion is inevitable, but lack of transportation choices is not. With limited funds, we need to focus our investments so that more people can walk, bike, and use transit for daily trips. The plan contains many smaller projects such as pedestrian and bike improvements in Falls Church in the city of Fairfax, improved access to rail stations on the Manassas VRE line, and bus connections to Loudoun Silver Line stations that can leverage transit and supportive land uses to have a regional impact. First and last mile trips are regionally significant. 1/3 of all trips in Fairfax County are 3 miles or less. Shifting a fraction of those trips from cars to other modes will relieve congestion. I live in the city of Fairfax. I drove on Route 50 to get here, right through right through the city of Fairfax and down Fairfax County, past Merrifield. And Fairfax City is trying to redevelop Route 50 as a pedestrian-friendly, bike-friendly corridor. When that happens, that will shift more trips from single occupancy vehicles to bikes and walking. Those are fewer cars using a regional major arterial road. That's a traffic solution. So in conclusion, the plan has something for everyone to like, but you'll have to make choices in developing the first 6-year plan. And the first priority should be those projects that leverage our existing assets. Thank you.
That will be our last speaker in tonight's public hearing. I want to address a couple of items that came up. I just want to address those folks. First of all, we definitely appreciate everyone who came out and spoke tonight or provided written comments. The official public comment period will be open until the 23rd of this month. And again, you can submit those in writing, or you can visit our website, www.nvtatransaction.org, to get more information or to submit more comments. There's one issue a couple issues I want to touch on that came up a few times, and I want to just provide a little information on. Several speakers, particularly toward the end, sort of asked the question of cost-benefit analysis and where does the cost piece come in? It's a great question. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is an unconstrained plan. It is not this part of our overall work here at the Authority is designed merely to provide data about the congestion relief component of the projects and a few other measurements that go along with that. The congestion relief is a big part of it. The cost piece, the question of where do these individual projects, how do they individually compete when it comes to cost benefit, comes in the next step of the process, and that is our 6-year plan or our programmatic component of this. What will happen is once we adopt this plan and again identify the panoply of projects that could be funded, our local jurisdictions as well as the various transit agencies and some of our other multi-jurisdictional agencies will be given the opportunity to submit projects from this list, some of the 350-some projects, choose those that they feel are most critical for their community, for the services that they're providing. And as part of that submission, they are required to provide evaluated cost information about the specific project. That those applications will then be evaluated by jurisdictional staff, again, using the data from this plan. And what I'll share is this. When you make a cost-benefit analysis, there's two pieces. There's cost and there's benefit. On the benefit side, these congestion relief scores coming out of TransAction make up 45% of the benefit cost. There are other factors that are also added into this that measure the overall benefit of the project. And again, from that point, it's all compared based on cost. So again, this plan, it's correct to point out this plan does not include cost data, and I think it was pointed out that it would be very difficult to get meaningful or accurate costs for all of these projects. But no project is even considered for funding. Before we even talk about whether or not we're going to fund something, the jurisdiction or agency that hopes to have us fund it must provide that cost data. And then those projects, which we're actually considering in the short term for funding, will be compared on a cost-benefit analysis. There was a reference made to what we call our CRRC chart. It's the most eye-straining Excel spreadsheet you've ever seen, but it's congestion relief relative to cost. And under state law, that measurement, that cost-benefit piece, must be the primary source of analysis we use in selecting projects. So that is to say that, again, this document, the transaction plan, isn't what chooses the projects for us. It merely gives us information about which projects we might want to choose. And then this information, when coupled with additional technical data, as well as that cost information, that is the point at which we begin selecting projects for funding. And I think one of the challenges we've dealt with over the years when dealing with this is that we do hear from a lot of folks, like some of you tonight, and it's very understandable, who want to know, well, which of these are we going to build? And the answer sort of is, tonight we don't know which of these we're going to build. But if there are certain projects that you definitely want to see constructed or added into our network, or projects that you don't want to see added into our network, now would be the time to start communicating with your local jurisdictions and with the transit agencies to let them know what your priorities are, so that when my colleagues and myself come back in October and the months following to recommend projects to actually get funded, your feedback can be incorporated. And then, of course, through that process, we'll have additional public outreach where you can comment on those specific projects or on the packages as a whole. There was one other item I wanted. Oh, there was a mention of a couple of different projects that were mentioned. There was sort of mentioned that, well, this particular one that comes to mind for me is Bi-County Parkway, one that's in my jurisdiction, which is not included in Prince William County's comprehensive plan. I think there were references to a few other projects that may not be in local comprehensive plans. That is, in many cases, the case throughout the region. And that's because projects don't end up in the transaction plan simply based on the local comprehensive plan. There are other projects that may be identified in a state plan or in a different regional plan, which haven't been identified as a local priority. But because they've been suggested as a possible regional priority, we've included them in this document for analysis. But the question of whether or not they are a local priority absolutely becomes relevant when we get to the funding stage, because generally speaking, we focus, when it comes to funding time, on those projects that the localities identify as their top priorities. Of course, it's always in the best interest of the localities to look for those projects which they know will have a big impact on their community and will score best on that cost-benefit analysis. So just a little bit of initial feedback on that. I just want to offer up to other authority members if there are other observations or comments you wanted to share with the public before we move on to our business meeting, and this would be probably a good time to do it. Mr. Silver Black?
You know, I just comment that I really appreciate everybody coming in tonight, and you know, I think our job is, of course, we have the job of trying to take a long-range view of what needs to be done with transportation throughout the area. At the same time, life is finite, and what counts is the people who have to drive those roads or that transit today. And so I certainly, you know, I think everybody has a little different approach to this, but I personally am very influenced by the comments that I hear from the people who take the time to come out here and give their thoughts. So thank you very much for that.
Senator Black. Anybody else have any comments to share? Chairman Randall.
So first, I want to say thank you all for coming out and spending so much time with us tonight. I've taken, I think, 3 pages of notes, and so I appreciate it. I want to caution that there's not a mistake made when a vote is taken to go study something that means that thing that's being studied is going to happen. Sometimes you have to take a vote to study something to find out what you should or should not do. So a vote to study, say, a bridge crossing, doesn't mean a bridge crossing is going to happen. It means we're going to study it. And I do think there has been maybe some confusion. Now, to be fair and to be honest, the first study on the bridge crossing we found out was done in 1950. So we have been studying this for a very long time. I also want to say that I personally would love to see some of these voices walk into our local boardrooms. In Loudoun County, we've had a transit summit and a transportation summit in the past 6 weeks, and it would have been helpful to have some of this feedback, especially from organizations, come into our room. And thirdly, I want to say that I have made lots of efforts to reach out to some organizations that came and talked today without getting any response back. So I really do want to have a two-way conversation. And so if you see me reach out directly or even in a newsletter, please let me know. And I like most of Virginia, will go on recess in August because I got to go down for a sec. But when I do reach out, I will specifically say I reached out to Sierra Club 7 times to discuss the bridge crossing and haven't got one thing back, not one time. So let's have a back and forth because I think it's helpful. I think it's healthy, and I think that I personally, I can speak for myself, would appreciate the intake of information that someone else might have for me to receive. So thank you for coming out.
And I would also like to thank everyone for coming out. Transportation can be complicated, as you have just heard, and frankly, a lot of evaluation goes into the process prior to a project eventually being funded and eventually being designed and then being built. So for some folks, I know that it can be confusing and it can be a little bit scary when you hear about a project that's going to be on the plan or is being evaluated on a plan. And as you've already heard, that doesn't mean that is going to be built. On the other hand, it could be built. It is on a plan to be evaluated and to be looked at and to be judged. So it's important that we do continue to hear from you. I know that in Fairfax County, we do a great deal of outreach. I think we've got about 3 or 4 opportunities throughout Fairfax County for people to come out and hear specifics about the plan, ask questions, and I would encourage you to do that. But I'm here listening and taking careful notes about the comments that I've heard from you here tonight. So thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I'd also like to thank people for coming out. It is always interesting to see folks come out to, whether it's a council meeting, a board meeting, or an authority meeting, who are informed and thoughtful and care about not only their community, but what's taking place in their community. And so I thank you for that. I will say this, I can understand why people have some concern about projects that are just sort of almost thrown out there. There's a huge list that we cannot fund, and it's hard to understand that. On the other hand, the NVTA is supposed to help provide some solutions. And that's what this board, with its staff and the staffs of our jurisdictions, will take up next. It will be constrained. There will be a limit to the amount of money that's going to be spent, and the projects will have to be within that constraint. So though the transaction is unconstrained, the 6-year plan will be constrained. And so I look forward to that, and I hope that as we come together as a region, that the solutions that we choose will help move our region forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just, I too want to say thank you to everybody who came out tonight. I was struck as the evening went on that we had a number of folks commenting not just about roadways, but about the multimodal aspects of transportation and how important that is to moving people throughout this region. And we did talk about this at our last meeting and the need that the authority is going to have to track what we're doing in these areas, the networks that we're creating, whether they're for pedestrians or bicycles or transit. And so I want people to walk away knowing that we understand that we've got to figure out how to communicate that more clearly in the work that we do. When we did the last call for projects, we were, at the end, I sort of asked the question of like, did all these roadway projects, were they just roads? And 80% of them had a piece of another network included in the project, even though the project was classified as a highway project and only showed up in our roadway list. So help hold us honest on that is what I would say to you. Because I think we all live in communities. We gotta have all of these things for it to actually work up here. And our intention is to move toward that. So help us, encourage us, point out the places that needs to be more clear, because I really do think that's what we're trying to do.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, I just want to add a few words to what everyone's saying, but first of all, just thank you for coming out and being with us. I think that sometimes after a hearing like this, someone might think of an idea, or somebody couldn't come tonight or whatever. So I think the chairman's suggestion that people can weigh in still after this, we're still here. It's open till July 23rd. So I think that that's helpful to us. We are more, I would say, metrics oriented than maybe than other decades ago, but in terms of what we're looking at. But one thing that occurred to me is just in general is that if you hear about an idea and you feel that it's just totally wrong-headed, that's one thing. But perhaps you all might have other ideas that nobody's thought of, all these experts. I think that's really important. We don't have all the answers, but I say that if you have a suggestion, let us hear it as well. Not just say don't go this route, don't go that route, but we are definitely open to suggestions as well. So that's until July 23rd. So you can let others know as well. I think more input in that regard would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. There were some really interesting comments made and good suggestions. The multimodal part that Mary was just talking about, which many of you spoke to. What I'd want to just mention is that there are multiple transportation organizations, and the one I'm going to reference is the Transportation Planning Board, which is the Maryland, Virginia, DC. And we look at the constrained long-range plan for the, 3 Northern Virginia, suburban Maryland, and the district. And there's been a lot of conversation at that body, several people around this table participate in that, about all these billions of dollars that we're putting in, and 20, 30 years down the road, the problem still gets worse. And there's a frustration about that. Here at this body, it's all about projects. But I think it's fair to say that the Transportation Planning Board is, for the first time in a long time, taking really seriously a look at not just projects, but other ways, through policies, through land use, trying to think more broadly, as many of you suggested today, because sometimes those are the cheapest ways to solve some of our problems or reduce some of our the congestion that's out there. So there is an effort underway to look at, land use, at those last mile connections, at policies, at parking policies, transportation demand management, a whole range of things that we'll be slogging through that I think brings to the surface some of the suggestions and concerns that we heard today. This body is about the really substantial amount of funding that we have, and it's focused on projects. But as a region, we're actually beginning to go a little beyond that as well, and I think that's basically a good thing for all of us. So thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. With this, we are good. We're now closing tonight's public hearing. We do still have our business meeting ahead of us. It just gets more exciting from here. So feel free to stick around, but also feel free to go home if you have to. It is 9 o'clock. Thank you very much.